Now we're talking about whether criminals should be freed from prison early. 020 7862 2222. Give us a call. So here's what's happening. Nearly 4,000 offenders who've been recalled to prison for breaching parole could now be released early. It's part of the government's plan to tackle overcrowding in prisons. They're looking to change the law so criminals sentenced to less than a year will receive what are called fixed-term recalls. That means you get out early, you're on parole, you break your parole. Instead of going back to serve your whole sentence, you just spend 2 weeks in jail. So, you're the lawyer, Chris. What do you think?
Well, I think that our prison population is massively too high and has been growing and growing. When I started as a lawyer in the 90s, the English prison population was about 45,000. It's now 85 and approaching 90,000. It's almost doubled just in the period that I've been.
More crime? More, I don't know.
No, not more crime. We've just this is one of those other features of kind of populism that we've seen. At the last election, Priti Patel, Boris Johnson, amongst other things, campaigned that we should increase the amount of time that people spend in prison for sentences that they've already been sentenced to, meaning that you need more and more prison places. And actually, that was popular. People vote for it, but people don't necessarily think of the consequence, which is actually not any reduction in crime at all. It's just a bigger and bigger prison population on the road to mass incarceration of a kind that they have in the United States, with 2.5 million people in prison.
What do you think, Angela? Just let's start now and say, if you're on parole, you're on parole. You're basically out. Even if you reoffend, you're not going to be pulled in for the first crime.
I find it absolutely astonishing. This is the old fixing the wobbly chair, the kitchen table by just you keep slicing down the legs on the table. If there's a problem with not having capacity in prisons, then let's look at the issue of capacity, not at the issue of somehow minimising crimes that have been committed.
But Chris says 40,000 in the 90s.
We have too many people in already.
What about the victims? What about the victims of crime? Even small-scale crime, it is a violation. What about the number of people that will be on probation? Who's going to be dealing with all the people that are out after their extra 2 weeks? Where's the capacity in the community for dealing with that?
You're right, but when you say what about the victims, that's a very, very important point. And my answer to that is that at the moment, we in Britain create more victims because we have a system of criminal justice that has far too many people in prison, does nothing to rehabilitate them, and they come out and they create more victims.
But they can't offend while they're in prison. I mean, that's the argument for prison.
Well, they can. They can kill prison guards, they can kill each other.
But they can't offend they can't offend in the outside world while they're in prison. It's stating the bleeding obvious, but that's why prison works, isn't it?
No, but it doesn't work.
People can't offend while they're in it.
No, it doesn't work because the statistics are very clear, particularly for short sentences. So what we're talking about in this policy is people who are sentenced to less than 12 months, which are, on the whole, are not violent criminals. They're not particularly dangerous criminals, because those sorts of criminals receive much longer sentences than 12 months. So we're talking about people often with addictions, mental health problems, and these are people that shouldn't be anywhere near prisons. They should be in hospitals, or they should be given community psychiatric or addiction care, because that's the way you stop future victims.
Okay.
If they come out as heroin addicts, they're going to be heroin addicts and they're going to commit crime to fund their habits.
Christine in Middlesbrough, hi.
Good morning, everyone.
What do you think of this?
Well, I really believe that this country definitely needs more criminals on the street. I mean, where's this? Who's made this idea up? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, ask any shopkeeper now. Does he want more criminals breaking into his shop and stealing everything without even batting an eyelid? It's absolutely, the decent people of this country are getting so they don't go out on the streets. But it's a lawless country. It's becoming a lawless country.
Chris will answer that. Yeah,
spineless government that are doing nothing.
Okay.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Hang on, Chris.
Yeah, the problem, Christine, is that when you have anywhere in the world where you have a policy of locking more people up for longer, you have a society that is more dangerous. And the United States is the best example I can give. They have 2.5 million people in prison, as I've said, the vast majority of them for non-violent crime. And do you think it's safe on the streets of Chicago or Miami or Los Angeles because they lock more people up?
I don't think it's safe on my street, never mind America.
But you're 100 times, you're significantly...
I mean, the prisons are full of probably people who shouldn't be in this country to start with. Why don't we send foreign prisoners who are offending this country, why don't we deport them? And then there'd be more room for our own criminals, because we've plenty of our own.
But would you deport them?
Criminals as well.
Christine, would you deport them before they'd serve their sentence?
As soon as they committed a crime, I'd deport them.
Yeah, but then there's no punishment.
Why should our taxpayer pay for them in prison? No, you commit a crime in this country, go back.
OK, thank you very much. Angela, the point Chris makes about America is interesting, and I don't get it, and it is a good argument, where you've got the most vicious penalty for murder, i.e. electric chair, lethal injection, even one guy they did with a firing squad, and yet the murder rates are through the roof.
Because nobody commits a crime assuming that they will get caught. Otherwise, people would not commit crimes.
So in that case, there's no point in prison at all?
No, I disagree with you. The thing is that we have lost the fear factor of prison. To me, as somebody, an ordinary person like Christine and people that bring in this show, ordinary person lives by the rule of law. The very idea of having my liberty taken away from me for 2 days, for a day, is terrifying. I went to one of these old Victorian jails in North Wales recently when I was there. It's like a tourist place now, small cells, you know, everything. These dank, gloomy places, and you think, how do people bear it?
You would want to go back to a bit of that, would you?
I would want to go back to a system where, no.
Like Robben Island?
Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting we're doing Papillon stuff, but what I'm saying is that we go back to a system where people emerge from prison saying, I don't ever want to do that again. Never mind rehabilitation.
But when did that happen? That's never happened.
So that's
just a
part
myth.
of the issue. So we're taking one slice out of the cake here, because this idea of coming out of prison and think, well, I'll just have a bounce back for another 2 weeks is not terrifying. You'd think somebody would come out of prison after a year and saying, I don't want to go near that.
I had a weird, I was just going to say, strange thing, and it was given publicity at the time, about 5 years ago. And I was basically sort of attacked on my bicycle by a very angry driver, and they threatened to beat me up and stuff. So I reported it, and when I reported it, it was really interesting to me, as somebody who doesn't engage with the police very much. The police said, well, we'll definitely know who this is. We've got pictures of her. She will definitely have previous offences. So I thought, I mean, you would know this because you're in the legal system as well. I thought, that's interesting. That wouldn't have occurred to me. And it turned out she'd had 16 previous offences and was on a suspended sentence for a crime of violence when she took it out on me. So the culmination of all of that is that finally she went to jail. Yeah. She didn't really go to jail for what she did to me. She went to jail for, it was like the referee on the pitch where he says, you'll get a yellow card for that foul, that foul, that foul. That's what the judge did. He said, I'm taking this all together. Yeah. And now, that suggests, Chris, doesn't it? We're leaving it too late with some of these people.
You see, this is the problem. When you look at a case like that in isolation, if I had to hazard a guess, a wild guess, I would say that the person you're talking about is someone who will have had a history of life trauma, addiction, and all manner of other adverse life events, which most of us can't remotely imagine.
Lots of people have them without duffing other people up.
No, they do. But that's just like lots of people have, you know, perhaps some people get cancer and others don't. It's just random chance as to how your kind of addictions and your...
She will have pleaded all that. I'm sure she did.
But this is the point. It's not a get out of jail free. It's just being sensible. Do you want her to stop doing it, in which case treat the addiction and the cause of the behaviour, or do you just want a few months respite? You take a choice.
Because once you take that kind of holistic view, you're almost operating from a position that the whole thing is predicated on she didn't know the difference between right and wrong, and therefore you're giving people the idea that somehow if there's something in the background, you know, people that were in Japanese prison camps during the war, Holocaust survivors, people who've been through unimaginable trauma, you didn't have legions of violent criminals after the war.
Let's pause. We'll take a break and then we'll come back to this. It's an interesting debate. We'd love your calls. Should criminals be released from prison early? 0207. More calls on whether criminals should be freed early from prison. 0207 862 2222. Let's talk to Melvin in Kent. What about this, Melvin? Basically, if you break your parole, you won't go back to prison for long.
Well, it depends on the crime they've committed, I think. Let's be fair. I mean, the criminal justice system's in utter chaos. Yeah. I mean, across the country, 750 police stations have been shut, and another 100 going to be shut. And it's in utter chaos. I was up London last week and talking to a black cab about it, and he said it used to be 8 minutes from where if something happened to a police station. Now it's 25 to 30 minutes.
I remember. Well, that's if he goes the long way round, maybe. Yeah.
Well, no, that's General, he said.
I'm with you. Yeah. Well, listen, Melvin. We had a story this week. You ought to see this, Melvin. We had a story saying in half the neighbourhoods in England, they haven't even solved a burglary in the last 2 years.
No, I mean there's 5.5 million crimes being committed.
Well, Chris is the closest we've got to someone to blame for all that because he's a lawyer. So, what is going wrong?
Well, you know, Melvin makes a really good point, which is that, you know, the thing that I think one of the crimes that people are the most afraid of and the most upset and you know, distraught about when it happens is burglary of their home. When people break into their home and often steal, you know, goods that have a relatively low value because they are looking for money for heroin usually or crack or another drug, and the police just don't come. And that's a catastrophic justice system failure, because at the time you need them most, which is when your house has been burgled, is in disarray and you're in great fear that the people might come back again, for example, that's when the police need to be there in minutes. And they need to be taking fingerprints and they need to be solving the crime.
But the average burglar who ends up in jail has already committed 40 offences.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Incredible.
But
why not put him in jail for the first offence?
Because the reason why burglaries are committed these days is overwhelmingly because of drug addiction. And if you don't treat the drug addiction, the burglary will continue.
We're coming on to drugs. Melvin, thank you. And that you told us that taxi driver story a couple of days ago, Melvin.
I know. But
it's a good note. Keep ringing up and telling us it. It's brilliant.
Well, I mean, it's the truth.
No, I mean, I think it's we can hear it every day. Thea in Ayr, hello.
Hi.
So, should we essentially find any excuse to get people out of prisons because they're bursting at the seams?
Absolutely. I can kill two birds with one stone. Number one, if they are bound to go to jail, why not set up a special army unit in the armed forces? Instead of them going to jail, they go into this special armed forces.
Yeah.
And then it will be dealt with by the military, and it will be trained up by the military.
Oof.
And maybe you'll find that some of these convicts actually quite like the discipline and want to join the army.
Well, I would love that to happen. Is that not a bit unfair on the army to stuff it full of burglars?
The army is looking for more people.
Yeah, but not the right stuff, not the wrong stuff. I don't know. I just wonder, Thea, whether that's fair on soldiers to say, look, you've got 3 new guys this week in your platoon.
No.
And one of them was a burglar. The other one was what? No.
No, there would be a special unit. It would be separated from the.
Okay. So you sort of Well, so a special military unit with criminals. Maybe. I mean, they would be tough.
I think
Angela?
Thea makes a very good point. I mean, OK, I understand the logistics of it. We've got a vastly depleted army.
They're very disrespectful to our soldiers.
Yeah,
seriously.
and well, Hunt was
put them on a par with criminals.
Didn't give the defence forces any more money in the budget. We know we've got the smallest army since in the history, since the Second World War. But the point being that what Thea's saying is discipline, routine, some kind of iron sort of template that you have to make people understand and respect that there is responsible behaviour.
And a sense of service.
Needed.
I know. I appreciate that, Thea. Thank you. Yasmin in Manchester. Hi.
Hi. Good morning, Jeremy.
Shall we just get? Let's say we got 100,000 people in prison. Let's get 20,000 of them out of jail, sharpish.
Well, personally, I think anybody who's not done anything that is vicious or violent should be released from prison. Anybody say not paying the tax.
Well, you're nodding at that. So stalking isn't a violent crime.
No,
so
stalking is a violent crime, undoubtedly, because there's psychological damage
well,
as well as physical damage. But that's different. But no, we have in our prisons, we have 69% of the prison population are in for non-violent crimes. You know, over 10,000.
Defrauding old ladies.
Only over 10,000 for drug offences alone.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of non-violent crimes that are brutally
but putting
nasty.
people in prison doesn't stop those the rate of reoffending of those who have been in prison, particularly for short sentences, is astronomically greater
that's true.
than almost any other form of punishment or any other form of sentence.
Yasmin, thank you. James in Shropshire, do you think we should get a good 15,000 criminals out of prison as quickly as we can?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And thank God for Angela on your panel here this morning. This guy on your left, he's typical of what we have to put up with these days. I'm a child of the 60s. Everybody in the 60s took drugs. Very few people went to jail. Now then, we're up to date. I went to a prison about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Shrewsbury Prison, which was decommissioned about 15 years ago. Very, very few people went back to that prison because it was a hellhole. I then visited Wrexham Prison, which is a holiday camp. That's why you have people reoffending, because they know that when they go back to prison, it's a holiday camp and they can enjoy themselves.
Thank you, James. Thanks for all the calls on this. After the break, should all drugs be legalised?